Okay, so in this video, I'm gonna walk you guys through probably one of the most powerful mindset tricks that I've ever learned when it comes to running a business. Now, what you need to understand is that we're gonna be hit with a lot of information. We're gonna be asked to make probably the biggest thing as an owner, that the demand for us is to make decisions and to make decisions quickly. Because I see this a lot, and especially with the owners we work with, or even myself when I have my clinics, is that indecisiveness when it comes to making decisions is one of the biggest bottlenecks inside of a company. And then not only that, is when an owner doesn't know how to lead the team with decisions, they start to lose trust. And I started to feel that with my team a little bit, that we were a little indecisive with decision making. We weren't really 100% sure. We couldn't really commit. We were being a little bit more safe with our decision making. We weren't taking a lot of risk. And I think that when I look back at different times when we were doing good, and then different times when we kind of had a little culture issues and stuff like that, a lot of it came from the leadership and not being able to make good decisions. So what I want to teach you guys here is how to acknowledge your enemy, okay? And a lot of us need to understand this basic principle. And when I start to hear this, it really opened me up to understanding this, hey, this isn't a me issue. This is just how we're wired as humans. And as long as we understand that and identify it, and we could leverage it, that's when we're going to start to win the game. So what do I mean by that? A lot of us are going to hear a piece of information. It's just going to be a fact. So let's just call it a fact of information. It's just hey, we need to hire a physical therapist, right? We're filling up and we need to hire a physical therapist. Or, you start to, hey, we need to drop a certain insurance. Or there's going to be all this different information. Or for all my dads out there, or my moms, maybe your daughter comes home one day and says hey dad, I'm getting married, right? I just been engaged to, right? That's a piece of information, that's a fact. Now, the thing is that we need to understand that when we hear facts, we put a frame around it, and that frame could either have a positive meaning or a negative meaning. So, what do I mean by that? So think about it hey, we need to hire a physical therapist, right? A lot of us will default to, well, what if we hire and we don't fill them up? Some of us, very few of us, will be well, how amazing will it be when we hire and we do fill them up, right? A lot of us will actually default to negative. Same thing in that marriage example is it's hey dad, I just want to let you know I'm getting married. And it's just hopefully not to the guy that you were dating, or how much is that going to cost me, right? So a lot of times we default to negative versus being oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. This is amazing. I can't wait to celebrate. So I want you guys to understand something. Most individuals or mindset coaches or stuff like that in the space, what they do is they say well, don't think negative. You got to think positive. You got to think positive thoughts. And I'm here to tell you right now, I think that's a huge detriment, right? What I want you guys to understand, this is where the power of what I'm teaching here comes in, is that we want to understand that our brains are wired to protect us. We are primal individuals, and we have millions of years of survival built into the logical brain, and everything in life is meant to protect us. And because of that, being successful in business is going against every single thing that we're wired to do inside of our heads. And what I mean by that is that being successful means taking risks. We have to take risks in our business in order to be successful. And our brains tell us no, don't do that. Because if you do that, you're going to go bankrupt, or you're not going to make money, or going to lose money, or going to whatever, right? So we need to understand that our minds will always default to negative thinking first. Now, some of you guys are blessed, probably about 10 or 15% out there, that you don't think negatively, you just go straight to positive, and that's where a lot of my doers come in. So we have a lot of owners that are in the program that just kind of get information, they go and do. They're a little reckless, but at the same time, they just don't focus on the negative. But most of us, and I myself included, we will default to negative line of thinking. But then I want you guys to understand it's okay. And just sit there for a second and ask yourself this one simple question. What's the worst case scenario? And when you sit there and you ask yourself, if I hire a physical therapist and we don't fill them up, what's the worst thing that could happen? Now, it's funny, I asked an owner that question one time, and they started to go, and they're well, if we don't fill them up, then I'm going to lose money, and if I lose money, I'm not going to be able to pay payroll, and if I can't make payroll, I'm going to lose the business, and if I lose the business, my wife's going to divorce me, and then when we get divorced, I'm going to have to sell the house, and my kids are going to... I was hold on a second. We just went from here to here really, really quickly. It's just well, slow down. And this is where a lot of us think. We just spiral, and we start making up things that and that's where we put our focus. But just know, worst case scenario, if you hire a physical therapist and you don't fill them up, well, then you just have to let them go. Or maybe they're really, really good and you have another therapist that's not producing, then you let them go. But at the same time, like, that's worst case scenario. If you keep a provider on that's not full for like 9 months and you do lose money, well, then that's kind of a you issue because you probably shouldn't have kept them around, or you probably should have figured out some marketing. But at the same time, like, give yourself a little grace to default to negative, sit there for a second, and then after you ask yourself what's the worst case scenario, which, by the way, and I'll be the first one to tell you, you're probably already living your worst case scenario, right? That's why you're trying to figure out like, hey, I need to hire, I need to do this, I need to do that. Like, a lot of us are already in the worst case scenario, right? So just know that like it's not gonna be any different than what your current life looks like. But then you have to ask the empowering question, well, what if I do fill, how awesome would it look like if we did fill that provider? How awesome would that be? So ask yourself, like, default to negative, sit there for a second, but then ask yourself the opposite. And that's where you start to win the game from a mindset standpoint and make better decisions. Because what we want to do here is we're going to hear information and we're going to default a certain way. This came up the other day with an owner. He said that one of his staff members wanted to talk to him. And he's just like, well, they're going to ask for a raise. They're going to probably either that or they're going to quit or they're whatever. And I said, well, curious, like, why did you default to that line of thinking? Did something happen? He goes, no, I've just, this has happened all the time and I just know that this is what they're going to be asking. And when they had the meeting, it actually turned out that the conversation was about something completely different. They had an idea to grow the company and completely caught him off guard because he thought he was going to have to come and pay payroll and figuring out like what that was going to work. And this person showed up with an idea to actually grow the company. So I want you guys to just be careful here, and to take this a little bit step further is when you guys do default to negative, then what's going to happen is that belief that you put around that information is a belief of doubt. Like, you doubt that it's going to work. So that is where you put your focus. So you have doubt now. And when someone has doubt, it's just a fancy word for saying they have anxiety. And anxiety, and this is what's really helped me, is that anxiety, by definition, is focusing on a future outcome that you don't desire, right? You completely made it up. It's a completely made up thought. It's a future outcome that you don't desire. It didn't even happen yet, but what happens is when someone has anxiety and they put their focus on an outcome they don't desire, what happens, the feeling they get is a feeling of paralysis and they don't take action. That's why a lot of people that default to negative and have a negative thought process, they don't take action, they don't get results because people are like, well, you gotta think positive, not negative. But a lot of times I want you guys to realize is that we just need to flip it. So when someone actually focuses on a positive thought, they actually have belief instead of doubt, right? So where they put their focus is they now have belief, which is a future outcome that they do desire. And then they have anticipation, and anticipation energy, which is where you get really, really excited. You actually start to take action because you have power now. And then that's why a lot of people that have, positive affirmation and thoughts and stuff like that, they get results, but it's not because they manifested the results, it's because they took action that produced the results. So a lot of us as owners, I want you guys to understand, even if you're a negative thinker like I was, I want you guys to sit there for a second, ask yourself what's the worst case scenario, and then I want you to flip it to be like, well, what's the best case scenario? What if this does work? Now, the last piece I'm gonna give you guys here, and this took me a long time to discover because I started to be like, okay, well, that's negative, and now I gotta get to positive, and then I gotta start positive thinking. And I want you guys to know when you think over positively, what happens is you have this thing called the great fall. So it's like you get really, really hyped up and excited, and it's never really as good as you thought it was going to be, right? It's just like, oh, we're gonna go out, we're gonna have an epic night with all my friends, we're all gonna get together. And then you go out and you're kind of like, meh, right? So I want you guys to know it's never as good as you think it's going to be, and it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. So really you just have to remain neutral. So the key mastery here when it comes to running your business and why some owners are able to go really, really quickly and some owners just kind of stay stuck in the circle of sameness, the main reason for that is because they're either overhyped, they get overexcited and they kind of burn themselves out because it's never as good as they thought it was going to be, or they just sit there and they just worry and they never really take action to get results. So I want you guys to sit here in a neutral mindset. It's not positive, it's not negative, it's just neutral. And I feel like as you guys do that as owners, that's when you're gonna start to win the game. So if you guys like this content, go ahead and follow and subscribe. And if you guys wanna learn more about how using some of these principles in your business to be able to help you grow, click the description and go ahead and schedule a call with our team. And I look forward to talking with you. See ya.